Welcome everybody to this panel on life in a metro during the coming decade, opportunities and challenges for people living in Bangalore. And this afternoon, we have a wonderful panel with us. First, let me just introduce myself. I'm Meera, the co founder of Citizen Matters, which serves as a civic knowledge platform across cities. And our job is to enable citizens to become change makers. So, moving on to the panel, we have Ms. Lata Kumari, who's an IAS officer. She's now the secretary of RERA, which is Real Estate Regulatory Authority. The last 1.5 years she's been there. Then we have Bhaskar Narendrapa, who's now part of CREDAI. He's the president-elect, and he's also the joint MD of Habitat Ventures. And Sapna Karim, who has been part of Janagraha for a very, very long time, and she handles civic engagement there. And Vikram is going to be here stepping in whenever I have some questions for him. Vikram Rai is the General Secretary of Bengaluru Apartment Federation. And we also have another panelist, Naresh, who is supposed to be joining in. And when he joins, we'll kind of get him on board. So meanwhile, let me quickly start and talk about what we'll be discussing today. In some ways, we're all looking forward to January 1st, as though this terrible year can be forgotten and buried, and then things will be changed for the better. But today, let's just take a step back and look at the reality of our city and how we can build our future from this starting point. So the current decade is about to conclude, and Bangalore's been one of the leading cities in the country, and we have this maddening, pace of growth. Everybody calls it the boom, right? The IT boom or the real estate boom and all. Boom is the right word. It really felt like an explosion from 6 million to whatever 12, 13 million now. But unfortunately, the pace of growth has not kind of met with a adequate focus on the planning for the capacity, for our infrastructure, and really the quality of life. So now in the last many years, we've seen a lot of civic organization. People want a better city, right? The pressure and the demand from citizens are building up. So BAF is a great example of how people have got together to make a difference. Now, in the recent past, right, this whole COVID-related crisis really exposed how badly the city was broken, right? We didn't have enough hospitals or hospital beds, and it kind of showed the weakness of not just about from a medical pandemic preparedness side, but also in terms of our economy. A lot of people went hungry, homeless, and we really disowned our own. We had like workers who had to go back home to their villages because they couldn't find like food or shelter here. So in some ways, it really exposed the fault lines, right? Not just economic, but also social in terms of caste and communal differences. So, but some of us are still, living in a bubble, and that's not helping too. So in some ways, the city has a system which is, we can even say that it's designed to fail, right? The way the political economy runs, the way the master planning is done, or rather not done, the way the entire government machinery looks at like, okay, business as usual. Let's just, build flyovers, we'll build housing, we'll, continue the status quo. And we, as ordinary people, we citizens are also preoccupied with our lives and our petty divides, right? But how do we really look forward and have this larger vision of a better city? So now things are easing up, right? The lockdowns have gone, and we're kind of going back to our old ways. The traffic is back, the pollution is back, and so on. So have we lost this chance to reset the city itself? Like, what kind of vision should we look at, and how do we work towards that? So that is what we'll explore today. In fact, a lot of people will claim like, what vision, what really, we've had all these various committees over the years and to talk about what the new vision should be. But one thing now we should realize is that we cannot have business as usual. So whatever, all the money or the real estate or the riches that one can accumulate, you can't beat some challenges, whether it's a pandemic or pollution. Some things all of us will get affected or due to. So that's why I'd like to, open up this idea to the panelists and ask you all to weigh in. What kind of city do we design? Like, the recently Harini Nagendra, the ecologist, wrote about this 15-minute city, right? Paris is now redesigning itself into being a 15-minute city, that everything that we need in our daily lives, right? Hospitals and schools and our work should be within a 15-minute like walking radius. What do we want for Bangalore? Are we going to continue having like all this, dense pockets in outer ring road or electronic city and other areas, and then rest of the city is spread out? What sort of city do we really envision? And I'd like to throw it open to the panelists, starting with Ms. Lata Kumari. You kind of come from outside, you have that a sort of a dispassionate observing a view of how the city has been, and what do you think now that you've settled down here?
Yeah, Mira, I told you in the beginning itself, the coming to metros like cities like Bangalore, for that matter, even any other metro. So it is not a very comfortable for the suburb people. Even, okay, as I told you, the employment is the major attraction. So everybody throng here, and then they go for after their making their fortune. And finally, I told you, they plan for a settling down, and then they start the becoming a part of this city. So the vision wise what you are talking now, actually, so just it's a good concept, just whenever we see this city, I feel some our predecessors, they would have planned better way, when we see these traffic or some roads and the infrastructure what they have given to us. Okay, some extent fine, but it is not up to the mark, since we are all bearing that brunt. But this is what we feel, but let us see what other panelists talk about this one, Mira.
Okay, over to Bhaskar. Would you like to weigh in? I mean, you also an architect. I mean, can you react not as a builder, but as an architect and perhaps somebody who understands the urban planning perspective, right? How should Bangalore really look at growth? And how can, that'd be great.
The topic for the day is quite interesting, actually. The challenges of urbanization or the metro cities and how we'll be living in the coming decade. And to start with, actually, I mean, let me, this is purely my own opinion, actually. And I personally feel the vision document itself has failed. Okay, so the vision document is a document which is futuristic, which looks at the coming decades, it's 20 years, 30 years, or whatever. So if you are preparing a vision document based on an outdated, village maps with Bandidari and Kaldari, when we have a national highways and the state highways running within the city also. So the premise, the base itself is gone wrong. Actually, being the IT capital of India, wherein which we need to look at things scientifically and come out with an engineering solutions, especially with the present day context of artificial intelligence and things like that, we should have basically prepared a vision document, or rather going forward, at least BAF should insist preparing a vision document based on the geo-satellite images, which is realistic, which gives you all the data. The data collection is so extensive today with the help of technology, be it traffic and things like that. We cannot be having a conservative, old, outdated approach to the newer challenges. COVID has, like rightly mentioned by you, COVID has, kind of opened our eyes and thoughts. Okay, there are good things, there are bad things, but any metro is the economical hub, and people do want to be part of that for their growth and all of that. As a government, also it needs to look at other attractions or other magnetic cities in and around Bangalore city. Not everybody coming in. I mean, there has to be a clear buffer. Like I was just looking at the vision document 1984 CDP, that is 84, 95, 2015 and 2031. The total local planning area is same, 1,279 square kilometers. But the buffer areas is drastically reduced from 830 square kilometer of buffer area or the agri area to 305 square kilometer of today. So the pollution, I mean, so many, like we also need to look at and learn and quickly learn in sense. I mean, like if you do a one-way traffic, at the same time, the same thing can act the other way. Well, like traffic going in the morning and coming back in the evening, the one-ways can behave differently. So, I mean, there is a thought process, the change is a constant phenomena, and adaptability. I mean, I always keep telling that we need to look at fixing smaller issues so that the benefit is quicker and faster and larger impact is done. Somehow we have to work on, jointly and make sure that Bangalore evolves or comes out. And Bangalore's horizontal growth has to be curtailed. Bangalore should believe in vertical growth, and you cannot be extending the footprint of Bangalore city and keep cutting the agricultural area in and around Bangalore.
Right. I just want to add, one of the things that the Deputy Chief Minister said in the inauguration was the right CDP is a Sanjeevani. Right?
Yeah.
That was a very interesting point. But he also talked about ease of doing business, right? So that's one aspect, no doubt. But we're also talking about how can a city be, inclusive? How can a city be resilient and livable, right? So from that perspective, I actually want the next question to Bhaskar again. Can you wear your, developer hat now and actually share how builders can prioritize social and ecological well-being, okay, which means like, can you rethink this whole paradigm of development? It's not just about building with cement and concrete, but it's also about maybe you can provide services over new kind of services now, especially with a lot of work from home and other ways of working in the new era. There are other things that developers can do also, right, in terms of design, in terms of new services. How can CREDAI actually encourage this re-envisioning of in the future?
Okay, now the housing, especially the homes, have taken over every possible space in this planet today. Homes have started behaving like schools, to office, to hospital, to temple, to bar, to restaurant, to multiplex, to media room. You name it, home is replaced. Yeah. And today, I mean, even in our own experience, we have seen the upgradation of homes from smaller homes to bigger homes. That has happened, even in our case, to a larger extent with most of the developers. So effectively, I mean, whatever homes we build is not for ourselves, it is for the end user. Unlike in any other city, like generally you will see a lot of change of hands from the first agreement to the last sale agreement in other cities. But unlike in Bangalore or to a larger extent in southern India, the end user is the one who comes and executes the agreement, and as well as the end user, the same person executes the sale deal. So it is the end user driven market. So we need to understand and appreciate and recognize the product is for an end user. And by and large, in southern India at least, the homes are much better. I mean, everywhere there will be some kind of a element. That's a different matter. But by and large, if I'm talking about a credible developers from CREDAI, I mean, whatever homes they are delivering to a larger extent are home buyers centric and their requirement oriented. In fact, I mean, I wanted to speak to Mr. Vikram also later offline. I mean, in sense, I mean, how we can collaborate and come out with a user manual, the way we get for any vehicles, or even if you get a refrigerator or a TV, you get a manual. And because BF being one of the largest associate, I mean, where under whose umbrella a lot of resident welfare association also come in, if we can jointly come out with a user manual for the home buyers and provide them the do's and don'ts in maintaining a building, 10 paisa or 10% of your investment at the earlier date will eliminate the possibility of 90% of your investment at a later date. So basically, I mean, keeping in mind the current impact of COVID and the psychological impact, what it has done on the home buyer, even I personally feel the responsibility of the developer also has increased to come out and to deliver a home of present day requirement. Okay, so probably whatever inventory was there, that is being done. I mean, the future designing will be very COVID friendly is what I presume. Even cutting down of amenities, and I mean, I will not be surprised even if the pool areas are reduced in the future projects. Okay, so definitely I agree. I mean, there has to be some kind of a thing. And as far as ease of doing business, you were mentioning, and even BF also should actively participate in this. I mean, when we are talking about ease of doing business, and everything is done by the computer or a lot of processing and scrutiny and things like that. When this process is being adopted, there's no point in you having similar kind of numbers of tables where in which the officer signatures and all of that. So there also it could be simplified. When you are saying online, the human interface or the number of people involved in the entire process has to be reduced. Okay, so all these benefits will ultimately go to the home buyer.
Okay, so you've been talking about your customers in some sense in terms of facilitating them. But again, let me just take a step back and look at the larger like society itself, and which of course consists of home buyers is like one important stakeholder, but then there are also a lot of other people who are not necessarily in that bracket. So Sapna, would you like to come in terms of how you think citizens can engage, right? Not just in terms of the development and the buyers from that sense, but the larger society itself, like how we can all kind of engage in envisioning a city again. So in general, like from an apartment perspective, one thing that we have clearly seen is people start engaging in civic issues and even the neighborhood community when they buy a house, right? A lot of people, especially when you get to their 30s, you're kind of settling down and then you buy a house and then you start looking outside and saying, oh, the road is not good, my child is kind of suffering because of pollution, or I'm not getting water, we're dependent on water tankers, let's do something about rainwater housing. So all that connection and that comes in when people kind of own the house and they get this sense of responsibility to that, and slowly that responsibility increases to the neighborhood and the larger city itself. And this is a my observation, and I'm sure like Vikram you also agree, right? A lot of BAF members have come through that whole cycle, kind of learned and got engaged in different issues. So Sapna, how do you think like citizens can come, and what is the role beyond, of course, just the plain bones within the apartment? We have our certain responsibilities that we take up, but the larger society, like for example, you've been working on participative budgets, right? But can we go beyond that? It's not just budget, but participative planning, participative visioning, right? Would you comment on that?
Sure, thanks. I think you're absolutely right. The need to get people into the budget was only a first step, right? But there are no linear silver bullet solutions to this problem, right? They're a part of a larger way by which citizens should engage with governance and with the system. And so what we are seeing today, and I agree that the building of ownership possibly comes when one buys a home and one is really and truly irritated by what is going on in his or her neighborhood, right? And that really brings out all the angst, and we all become prestige pressure cookers and we want to go out and attend the first meeting and throw everything out. But you realize it's not, you have to keep going back for things to get fixed. And therefore, even as the state, and here I mean the city governments or legislations that are coming about, and we're seeing a lot of that happening in the last few days, it really looks at what is it that we're empowering our city governments with, and what are we empowering our citizens with. The good thing is, yes, you have something like a ward committee. Now, it has come in the middle of the 100-kilometer problem that's running, right? And that's the solution is still catching up at 10 kilometers, right? So, okay, so you've got a committee, you've got a platform, you've got to get people in, they have to start participating. What is the first thing that they can see? Okay, let's look at how much money has come in and where is it being spent. It's about creating a system of engagement and conversation and dialogue between different people, the government, the civic officials, your councillors, your citizens of all hues and colors, right? There are so many of us who want so many different things sometimes. It has to, and you're right, the logic and the life cycle of that process is actually to start with a ward plan. Is to start with a planning process, which is what do I want to see in my neighborhood? Where should the park be, and what should it actually cater to? Should it only be for senior citizens? Should it be for a mix of every kind of citizen that comes in there? Right? What do I want to see? Do I want the next let's say used car showroom to come up in my end of my street? I may or I may not. So what does mixed use really mean in this state? How does land use really come about? How do we stick to that? All of these are questions. So actually real estate and urban management are so closely linked together, right? So the fact that ultimately people end up coming and occupying these spaces, and they need to have platforms. These platforms will help them continue to stay connected and build ownership and create better cities and vision for their local neighborhoods. But the starting point also has to be through what policies will we actually create human settlements. Yes, Mr. Bhaskar was saying we have to go vertical, and that may be one way of looking at it, but you have to do that while you also set in basic infrastructure, right? What really happens, and we've seen that inside the city, we've seen it in peripheral cities, peripheral parts of the city, that things come up and then we start worrying about the hospital and the school and the park outside and the road infrastructure, the water lines that need to be laid. And then the metro keeps getting extended because you want to reach every end of the city. And I mean, one doesn't know if we keep growing like an amoeba, is there going to be enough density that is there to really make the metro even profitable in the long run? Should you actually keep things dense, close together, and look at the 15-minute and 30-minute city? Is that something that we should look at? So these are questions that require policy level, in inputs, of course. It also requires platforms for citizens to continuously engage. So they don't necessarily come one after the other. And we are in a place where we have to run on all of them at the same time. Right? So everything we have to find solutions for all. The ward committee is a great way to get planning going at the local level. Then if you can, filter that up to the city level and then it become at a ward and then the city, then that at least you get the sense of what does a citizen really want to see? And how does a citizen view his or her city and her neighborhood? I think that's a great way to start.
Yeah. Vikram, I'd like you to comment on this connection between this, the citizen and the government, right? The ecosystem. For example, the Deputy CM in the inauguration, he talked about, he appreciated BAF members or people living in apartments for taking care of yourself without depending on the system. And I quote him there. So what is this about being independent of the system? Is that how, of course, apartment residents are largely, self-sufficient in terms of, garbage clearance, you have your own vendor, for water, you're dependent on tankers. So in some sense, you're not so dependent on the, the local utilities and the service delivery agencies. But again, is that like sustainable? Aren't apartment dwellers, tax-paying citizens? Don't we have enough kind of ownership over the system? Vikram, you want to comment on that?
I think that's a very important and essential question to ask. I think when the Deputy Chief Minister mentioned that you're all self-sufficient and self-reliable, I think his commentary was largely focused on the fact that I think they are happy that much amount of pressure is reduced on the system, right? I think that was more of the opinion. But having said that, our view within BAF and the overall community is that, one, of course, we are not outside the system. Definitely, we need to agree to the fact that we are contributing parts of the system, including taxes which are going in. But I think we also want to accept and agree to the fact that the overall city is not infinite. Right? Let me put it that way. We are not living in an infinite city, right? There are limitations in terms of resources. There are limitations in terms of space. There's limitations in terms of people's ability to work around what I call design by chance and not design by plan, right? So I think that pressure will build up, right? So our view is that if you are able to look at demonstrating solutions, which the fundamental advantage that we have is, as a community, we can be a largely impactful group, right? Because of the numbers, essentially, right? Anything that we do today can potentially get translated to a few thousands of households. We can implement that. I'll give you a simple example of probably optimization of utilization of water, right? I mean, we have spoken a lot and promoted a lot on adoption of very simple low-cost devices for reduced utilization of water, for example, right? And potentially the impact of that can be very high if that adoption goes. Now, that's not something which we can go and tell the system to say that, hey, you keep supplying perennially and infinitely, right? We know for a fact that I think there is a limitation to that. And for our own benefits, I think to bring the cost down, we can be much more optimal in what we do, right? So I don't think so. I think our position is definitely not in terms of not being outside the system and beyond the system. I think it is being with the system and to be able to demonstrate a manner in which we can lead some of the models which can bring optimization to the way the city is run. Another example I would like to quote, I think there's some conversation going on within our groups on the aspect of solid waste management. Right now, that is one more infrastructural area. As people increase, the amount of waste which is getting generated is increasing, right? Now, the government's view, at least in the past few years, has been of one of fines and notices if you don't comply to something. Our view has been that, you need to be able to incentivize and motivate people to look at doing things their own way so that it becomes better, right? It's not a stick. It could possibly, even if it's not a carrot, full carrot, but it is something at least on that front. Don't give a stick kind of stuff, right? So in situ composition probably in that direction. But if you compost, what is the connect back to utilization of compost, which just piles up by the tons, right? I mean, I stay today in an apartment which just says 105 units, but we can technically produce 1.5 tons of compost every month, right? And and we probably use only about 100 kgs of it, right? So what is the backward linkage for usage and reverse linkage of that compost, for example, right? So I think it is to be able to have but we are already taking steps to see whether within hyper-local areas, within people, producers and members who are producers of compost, can we create a supply chain integration so that can then get connected to probably the perimeter of the city, where farming communities can take it and use it for farming needs, etc. It enables us to demonstrate such solutions. So I think, I don't think so it's beyond the system. I think it's just about having the opportunity to demonstrate solutions, models, frameworks, which can then become applicable to the wider city in general. It's just that aggregation gives us much more opportunity and ability to facilitate better planning and models for the future. I think that's our view.
So in some ways, what you're mentioning is very interesting, as in, can we call it like a positive externality? Whatever steps that you're taking within the complex or the campus of your apartment, you're doing it to help yourself in some ways, but the impact is felt beyond the apartment, right? So the fact that you're not sending it to a landfill, or the fact that you're reducing the water being drilled out from a bore well, actually has an effect on the larger ecological framework as well. So from that perspective, I think that's interesting, because you're saying apartments are like proof of concepts of how change can happen in some ways. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Definitely. I think, and let me, add to what you said, right? It definitely starts from a notion of self-interest, right? I mean, you will have to, and you mentioned about it earlier as well, unless you get your house in order, right? You will not be thinking about it. That's your house in order, your community and your complex in order, and the federation then is sort of reflecting and translating that to the overall ecosystem around it, right? So definitely great opportunity to demonstrate proof of concepts. Like one of the examples that we have, which has kicked in really well in our members and continues to grow, the initiative continues to grow, is on adoption of green energy. Rooftop solar models have picked up really, really well. At least as we speak, in the last year and a half, we have got at least about 70, 75, if not more, of our members who have either installed rooftop solar systems or are in the process of installing it now. And we have been able to bring the supply side system, which is vendors of EVs, people, service providers, system integrators, all of them. Cost and price have been able to be rationalized because of the volume of buyers. At the same time, we have also been able to work with entities like BESCOM to clear a lot of policy hurdles as well, right? It has been now made a little bit more single window. Earlier, it used to take 3-4 months for getting something called a power purchase agreement, or maybe more. Now it's much more smooth, seamless, and you can pretty much get up and running. You have vendors who are all standardized. The products are standardized. You know how the design fits into it, and you can be up and running within like a month and a half. And the ROI and the economic argument over there is also very strong, right? So a lot of that that orchestration has been done for that proof of concept, potentially now to becoming like a more mainstream solution, right? At least for multi-storied buildings. So yes, definitely, I think we look at it as an opportunity for good demonstrable models, proof of concept, which can in effect become great models for the rest of the city as well, not just and it also brings that economic throughput, right? Because there's a critical mass of buyers and users who are willing to sort of join in on that movement, right? Even vendors, commercial people, etc., will get that confidence to make it much more mainstream.
Right. So I want to take off on this one point that you made about the city bursting at the seams, right? You can have all these pockets of excellences within the city, but at the end of the day, there are finite resources. We're still limited in terms of how much you could grow, right? And Bhaskar talked about vertical. We need to go vertical, or we need to become more dense. Now, I don't know, from urban planning perspective, there are experts who say there are limits to how much the carrying capacity of the city itself, like we may be hitting it pretty soon, right? We've already lost much of the green belt, and we've lost, there's a lot of pressure on even the local nearby parks and so on, other open areas. And they've been talking about this development of tier 2 cities. So I had two questions. One to Bhaskar in terms of, from a real estate sector perspective, what are the challenges in actually going out and developing other cities? How do you create demand there so that the pressure on Bangalore is eased? And Lata ma'am, if you could talk about from a government perspective, how can the government enable it, and what are its challenges in getting people to move there, right? I mean, there's this thing of Bangalore is the place to be, all said and done. Like even IT companies, they've set up, like, for example, I think it was Infosys which set up a center in Hubli Dharwad, and 3 years later they still they don't find it easy to get their employees to move there, or for whatever reason. So in general, like both from from a policy perspective as well as an execution on the ground perspective, how do we actually ease this pressure?
Yes.
Bhaskar?
Now, actually, any product anybody does, actually, there has to be a consumer. I build a home, somebody has to be there to purchase it. So likewise, I mean, Bangalore being unfortunately only city in Karnataka, which is grown to such an extent. I mean, the 60 to 70% of the revenue to the exchequer government of India, government of Karnataka, comes from Bangalore city all alone, where in which probably it is less than 25% of the population or 20%. So now, I mean, COVID was a challenge, but this challenge has given an opportunity. And even there is a shift in mindset of the people also, even within Bangalore. Of late, we are seeing a lot of people gone back and working from home and things like that. So probably this has given an opportunity for government to push its unfulfilled dream of, upbringing the tier 2 cities and, the other facilities and things like that. So once, we have a potential home buyers there. It's not that, it's not there, but it doesn't require that kind of a development. Even today, whether you go to Hubli, Belgaum, Gulbarga, Mangalore, Shimoga, or even Mysore, everywhere there are apartments being built and they're being sold. But to a lesser extent, because whatever the possible potential home buying capacity is there, to that it is being done. So, for us, we'll be more than happy. Now, the larger development happening in the tier 2 areas is the plotted development than the same. So, probably these cities also over the period of time will become, probably second Bangalore or third Bangalore. Like Vikram was saying, we need to be open and we need to look at possible usage of the natural resources without even, or taking our the same. Be it solar energy or be it efficient usage of treated water and things like that. But of course, as I said, we are open, we want to go, but as long as there is a potential home buyer, we will be more than happy to go there and conduct our businesses. And for this government, actually, we need a push, because this is a great opportunity for government also. This is the right time for them to push the tier 2 cities.
You're on mute, ma'am.
Hello.
Yeah.
Actually, Bhaskar, being the president of the CREDA, is going on telling vertical development. Once the Bangalore was a green city, now it has become a concrete city. Really, it is very unfortunate. As you rightly mentioned, there is no green belt at all, and we are encroaching, and we were, just going on building a concrete. Everywhere. It is that is also it's having a huge impact, and our Bangalore's. Very well known, very famous climate, isn't it? When it was a very pleasant one, and now it is shifting it to the somewhat harsh, extreme weather climate. So that's why you see, when we are talking about a greater city, a vision of beautiful city, and a ease of doing business, at the same time, ease of living very comfortably, easily, that is also matters. For example, just we are talking about in terms of buildings, houses, roads, infrastructure, bridges, flyovers, and we never speak about, the greenery. We are cutting all the trees, and we are having small, small plotteries and in balconies, and we are talking about a rooftop gardening. And, just we mercilessly, we chop off our, street trees in the name of widening or in the name of infrastructure. That is also very unfortunate. When we are visioning or visualizing a beautiful city or a city for a very, in our future generation, and even for us also to live here, why we are dislike or detest to be in Bangalore is major reason is, if you come from a suburb or some other rural area, you miss that greenery and that pure environment. At the same time, this is also one of the biggest challenge, and everybody, especially these builders, they will not. Bhaskar, you don't take it in another way. They won't give much importance to this issue. Even when they construct the building, since I've been observing in our real estate sector, they only talk about the amenities like clubhouse, some garden, even garden they go for a fancy plantations. They never go for a huge trees and exclusive lung space. They won't keep the apartments like the even Bhaskar was mentioning, only 105 or 106 households, and you make into five more than 5,000. How many families? 100 families into 500 people are living over there. And then what is the lung space over there? Nobody is talking. That is the main concern of these builders. And otherwise, one more issue is of this resource management. And okay, we are keep on talking about resource management. Okay, government is not giving water, Kaveri water connection is we are not getting. We are self-reliant on certain matters, certain extent. Okay, fine. But exactly, then resource management is also one of the very important issue we need to look into when we talk about expanding our cities and going for constructing houses, and all these also issues matters. And please, Meera.
So I just would like you to share, like as an insider, how do you see the government actually, the kind of the vision and the commitment from the government circles, like what is your idea of like developing tier 2 cities and getting
Meera.
Bangalore to be more sustainable?
Yeah, Meera, when you mentioned Deputy CM's comment, whenever we talk about something, all these issues, like whether it's in a basic communities, water or power, or the solar, whatever, when we are talk about these resources, we always look towards a government expecting with a government would bring some, it is having a magic wand, it will do something, great, everything, all our problems will get over in a matter of a second. No, instead of that one, what we say, rightly told, a self-reliance is a must actually. When these builders, the developers, they go on constructing something, some thousands of units in the same area and same units, same pockets. So better to keep all these points in their mind and take up the projects and the initiatives. And also, here in this panel, though I represent a government officer, though I am an IAS officer, I cannot represent entire government sector, but I can represent real estate industry. Since I'm working there, I can talk on behalf of RERA as a secretary. But this is not a one issue. It is a complicated one. You suppose urban development department comes into picture, then pollution and pollution control board, and so many the other departments, all service providing more. There are more than 10 to 15 departments in the urban sector that come into picture. Actually, Meera, it is not a very single solution or a single topic. It's a multi-prong,
Right.
you see.
I understand. So maybe you could talk from RERA perspective of, when you approve projects, for example, what kind of checks and balances you have to ensure that the project follows one on the town planning side, right? And as well as ensuring the resource utilization and making it sustainable. So there are still also, there are like environment clearances and regulations. So at least to that extent, how are you able to do that?
Yeah, Meera, I told you, you see, just when we are approving the projects, then we are thought of one major issue, what we were observing was a labor issue. So when we are granting a real estate projects approval, so we are not really tackling that issue, labor, the migrants issue. They come and, when constructions goes on at the site place, there is a lot of issues, there are a lot of issues we need to attend to in labor, kids' education, their health, their, safety, then their rights, and that one, where really we have not tapped that one. And second issue is with regard to this, as I told you, the greenery, we need to make some ratio of that area. We have to keep it as an open, as a land space and exclusively for not, putting enough, okay, you keep grow some plants, but it is exclusively for a tree plantation kind of these things, that is also we are talking about. And at the same time, there are some planning areas when we talk about these real estate projects. So they are the builders, where they are going to save their space, and then later they're diverting that space to some other purposes. That needs to be monitored very strictly. Earlier they say that no, this is garden, it will come over here, later it will become something else, clubhouse, swimming house, something like that. Needs to be monitored very strictly. This is how we can keep our city. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, Meera.
Thanks, ma'am. Actually, again, I want to take off on this one point you talked about when you talked about the labor, especially during the lockdown. A lot of them were suffering. And I remember we did this study, and Bhaskar, I'm going to get you on board here, because I remember talking to one of your colleagues in CREDAI, and the challenge is like builders say they don't know who the workers are because it's all about the contractor. So there are so many layers to it. But I'm saying, isn't there a moral responsibility? Because when you talk about a city, again, we need to have this sense of responsibility to all of our, people, right? Which means not just your buyers and customers, but also about the poor, the other stakeholders, your employees and the people who are actually building those houses, right? So the labor and the workers and the urban poor, if we are able to, take care of them, that's also part of a better vision for the future, right? And how do you, as CREDAI, what are your plans to enable that entire ecosystem or, of the workers and that community, to enable them to also have better lives, not just your customers?
Okay. Before I answer this specific question, let me just rephrase what I said. What I meant rather was stop expanding Bangalore. What I meant was, I clearly said, don't reduce the agricultural area around, which is there in Bangalore. You have already reduced enough. So stop expanding and develop whatever is, there in existence. Okay. So the only thing I was saying was develop whatever is there as a plot area and stop expanding Bangalore and, reducing the agriculture area. That was one thing. And coming back to this question, see, I mean, majority of the developer. So let me not tell just developer. Okay, developer becomes 100%. Majority of the developers today, I mean, we will be happy, and enough evidence was even provided to the RERA also, where in which what all the measures we took, be it, supporting, though we are not directly in contact with the laborers, but on a humanitarian side, I mean, we made sure, I mean, even in fact, I myself visited our sites and made sure their groceries and all of that were met. I mean, when I said, I mean, the labor hutment, okay, generally, which is, in a walkable distance to our sites. So apart from that, actually now to eliminate this, I mean, the kind of migration, whatever you saw, probably you saw it after 1947. So, I mean, you cannot be, just, this is something which is not, none of us were prepared. This just happened. And I mean, I think we, as a responsible, developers from Bangalore or from Karnataka, we responded. very positively, and we made sure. I don't think, you would have heard any cases in at least Bangalore city or in southern India. Whatever you would have seen is, major, probably, few laborers who were, because the sentiments were running differently actually. They just wanted, because it was all sentiment one, they wanted to go back and there were no vehicles and things like that. And even we could not, but whoever was here, we really took care of them, and they were, well fed. And even today, the construction activity has started because of our behavior, the way we took care of them. It results in that. And further, to add to this now, we from CREDAI, we have tied up with the National Skill Development Academy, where we are trying to develop the skill set of the local requirement in the real estate industry, and we are increasing the labor force of the base from Karnataka. So we are also contributing. We are trying to enhance the labor base or the skill base within Karnataka, so that they do not have to go around and all of that. Yeah, that's it.
Right. Yeah, there are many things that happened during the lockdown, and a lot of conflicting versions. But again, if I could bring Sapna on board in terms of how we can again bring in like both. Is Sapna there? I think she dropped off. Okay, let me just move back to ma'am, Lata ma'am. So I just want to bring in like the earlier question that I asked you about the checks and balances to ensure projects, and also in terms of if we can move into execution, right? For example, what has happened in Bangalore in the last few years in terms of, been a lot of violations, and then we came up with schemes like Akrama Sakrama and so on. A lot of it has been, there have been this festering unresolved issues, right? And finally, the people who are penalized are the customers, the buyers, who are willingly or unwillingly have committed those mistakes. But what about from a government perspective, the officials who have kind of give those clearances? Anyway, that entire thing is very, very complex. But going into the future, how can RERA avoid these kind of situations so that the laws and the norms and regulations are adhered to and the entire sector becomes more transparent and easier to manage?
Yeah, Meera, you rightly told, initially I told, the making the life of a people here very comfortable, easy, making this city as livable, and not only livable, lovable also, isn't it? And here, the person who invests in the real estate sector, the lifetime is investment to get in a house. And especially in a metro cities like a Bangalore, as you all know, it is a huge costly affair for any middle class person or anyone for that matter, to get a house in a city like Bangalore. And how risky it was earlier, even before RERA. You just imagine the situation was very horrible. Even we have over 5,000 complaints filed before a RERA, where the buyers have got one or the other way, especially in Bangalore. 90% of those cases are from Bangalore. Why not from the other parts of Karnataka? So that because some Bangalore is having some problem, some issue over here, actually, we need to address. Okay, then the one who invests in the real estate sector, he has to go through a lot of things, the incompletion of the project, not timely delivering. Even after getting that one also, he has to run after the developer saying that, no, these amenities are not have not provided, not given as per the agreement. And also, the basic amenities sometimes, they are not even, they will not be in the place, and, like that. There are many issues. That is, when we talk about the city, making this city as one of the best one to live, these are all things matter. So as you rightly told, the era has gone, when once we were all talking about this one, now RERA has come. Really, I believe this is a ray of hope for the buyers, especially for the apartment dwellers. And it has brought lots of new things, and it is in the interest of the home buyers. And there are so many provisions which are there to safeguard the buyer's interest, Meera.
Right. So I'd like to have a related question to Bhaskar. So, like Lata ma'am mentioned, there is definitely a trust deficit between buyers and builders for multiple reasons. And I'm sure, I mean, as CREDA, you're trying to address those and create confidence. And obviously, regulations like RERA are also trying to bring in a lot of clarity and trust. But in general, over the years, it's not, it's obviously not easy to be a builder, right? And I've heard of this apocryphal story in back in Chennai in 20, 30 years ago. There was this builder who wanted to do everything the right way, right? Not bribe anybody, follow all the laws and regulations. And eventually that company had to close, right? Now, which means there are constraints from, even if you really want to do the right thing, because of the way the system is designed or the way it exists right now, there are a lot of those challenges. So from your perspective, how are those constraints? What kind of constraints, and how are you trying to overcome them? Because again, this whole, when we talk about the future and a vision, it's not just about how we design the city, it's also about how the system runs efficiently, effectively, and transparently for everybody.
So we were probably one of the few early people who really welcomed the RERA, and the RERA when it was set up, because it really matched. I mean, if you see the conduct role, I mean, whatever we have as a bylaw within the CREDAI, really matches or is in line with the RERA. Of course, I mean, in every home there will be certain elements I mentioned right early. I mean, you cannot expect 100% of the family members to be in the same kind of thinking process. Within the CREDAI or within the developer fraternity, there might be people who are there actually. But by and large, I mean, if you see even today, if you see the non-compliance of quarterly report within the RERA agreement, I mean, predominantly majority of them are from BDA and Karnataka Housing Board. Okay, so I mean, you will see. I mean, anyway, that only time is the fact which will put forth this thing. And RERA has really helped in eliminating within the developer or within even on CREDAI who are not following and all of that. They will be eliminated. They might be there for an initial period, but in the long run, they will not be able to sustain. So the trust factor, the deficit in trust will definitely build, but you cannot expect it to happen overnight. Okay, but RERA has really helped from that point of view to bridge the gap and to build the confidence or the trust. Today, I mean, earlier prior to RERA, like any home buyer coming in and looking at a due diligence was a big process. Today, the moment it is registered in RERA, that itself is a comfortable or comforting factor. So RERA has really helped is one thing. And there is a trust deficit, there's no doubt about it. And I mean, because I mean, we as a human being, we believe one bad experience, we don't appreciate our 99 good experiences. So that is the fact of the matter, how life goes on. But over the period of time, I am of the strong belief that this trust deficit factor also will be, taken over, and there will be enough, trust in the builder and the home buyers.
Right. And Sapna and Vikram, do you want to comment from bringing the governance and the citizenship aspect and bringing this sort of transparency, not just in planning, but also into development and, the everyday execution that Bhaskar is talking about?
Yeah, sure. I think it's, see, these are the more boring, mundane aspects of citizenship and democracy, right? To go sit in meetings and understand how budgets and money is being spent. I think campaigns that bring people around creating plans are more exciting and also help them come together on a vision. But it's really important to leverage platforms that are currently available. So as citizens, I think we have a right and a responsibility to participate in these matters, and also realize that it is a complex problem and it won't get solved very quickly, but the fact that we have to stay at it, right? And that's how the fact that the BBMP is now putting out information in the public domain on budgets, on works, on bills that have been paid is a very welcome sign. It's great to see that information is actually out there and you can go and look it up and use it as you see fit. Is it in the best format to be used? No, it's not, but it's a great step forward, right? And I think those are ways by which citizens continue to stay connected. And also, I think our citizenship stems, and many of us, I mean, of course, here we do it. A lot of people are more aware of these things, that as an individual, what do I do? What can I do in my home? What can I do in my community, in my workplace, and so on. And I think that's how trust also gets built. Partnerships between the city and the citizen needs to be catalyzed under the leadership of the city government, of course. So it's not about having citizens do all of the work, right? But about having them be informed, having them participate, plan, and be, I would say, a part of the journey that is unfolding for them. I think those are important ways to keep people connected and then therefore build trust. Many a time, I don't think citizens realize that, you should know this, I'm sure Vikram, all of us do that. We work with government, especially in COVID, very extensively in the last 1 year, right? They work from 6 in the morning to literally 11:30, 12 in the night. So it's not like people are not working hard. People are working hard. There may be systems that need to be fixed. There are methods of execution and many other policies that need to fulfill these aspirations. So I think it's important to get people into these partnerships, because then we all understand what does it take, and we can then work towards the larger, good and the quality of life improvement that we seek.
So how is it that BAF can come in, Vikram, then, in terms of, you have Nagaraj Rao mentioned, what about 1 million base, right? Resident base, and many of them will be voters. So how do you go beyond this engagement with the system, other than beyond the elections, into looking at these, participating in the master plan, feedback sessions, to looking at budgets for local development, local ward level development, to what is happening within the apartment, and this engagement with builders in ensuring that the community itself is has all that is required for a better life?
Yeah, I think it's an important point, and I would always think we are at a point of inflection, right? That's what I would like to think about it. And strangely, COVID as a pandemic has come in. It's put a lot of constraints on our lives, etc. But I would like to look at the, as they say, right, always look at the bright side of life. I would like to look at the better side of what COVID has brought in, basically, right? The opportunity which has come with that. And I go with what Sapna says. In the last few months, we've been party to the work which has been going on with different stakeholders, including, parts of the government which we thought doesn't function that way, right? And I think Sapna is rightly saying, a lot of people, I've been on groups where I've been amazed that, I go to sleep at night, there is activity going on, and early in the morning, it's started already, right? It's going on 24/7. And this is probably a system which is not used to it to work that way. I've been part of daily evening 8 p.m. calls where they do a daily review and stuff like that. It's almost too professional grade. And it's a system which otherwise is not very used to these processes, etc. Right? There are lacunae in that, but I think COVID has brought in that necessity, right? A forced need for all of us to work together, whether you like it or not, right? And in that sense, right, you can't just say that, in COVID, it was not that, you blame the system and say, I will not get the infection, right? I had to be responsible. I had to be cautious. I had to be hygienic. My community had to be cautious. There was a lot of friction in the community. There was also a collaboration which you need to do with BBMP, PHC, etc. So in a strange way, I think it has set the tone for collaboration to happen, right? And I do think that is the opportunity. But having said that, for BAF, I think the challenge for us also is connected to what Sapna mentioned, right? So how do you sort of make that mundane things, which is essentially the nuts and bolts of governance, right, trickling down to the local level? How do you make it exciting and interesting and in a day-to-day sense impactful for people so that they get interested, right? Which is where I think, we have to probably work with people like Sapna, Janagra. They've been, experts at this for such a long time. What we can do is to say that, hey, we've been probably partly successful in bringing people together through a network, right? probably leveraging a little bit of the self-interest of improving their lifestyle. But at the same time, currently the opportunities to move beyond that. We would like to do a lot more work at getting people, our own associations, members, interested volunteers involved at the ward level. We've been encouraging people, associations to become part of ward committees where the very basic nuts and bolts of planning, execution, working with the assistant engineer, the corporator, etc. happens, right? I mean, it's not a very interesting set of activities, but it's a very essential set of activities. So can we sort of make that as interesting as possible and as motivating as possible? I think is the opportunity and the challenge as well. And yes, I think that will be a big part of what we would like to do in the next year or two, to bring in that sense of participation at a local level, right? We have something called clusters today, which are loosely mapped to wards. Every member of ours falls into a certain cluster. We are trying to push as much. Like in COVID, we actually mapped all our clusters very neatly to the ward level and zonal level teams which are doing COVID testing and all those activities around that, right? So some bit of practice has happened on that front. Hopefully we can carry that forward into many other forms of local governance. I think that's when I think people will start understanding the flavor of it, the challenges of it. But at the same time, I think there will be a lot of advantage that will come in and benefit which will come in with lot many more people participating.
Yeah. So you are hopeful that things will be better, and then we are not going to go back to business as usual?
Yes, I'm an eternal optimist. I see what if at all anything, the pandemic has changed us for good. Let's not make the mistake to say that we are going back to where we were. I don't think so. That's going to happen, right? We are not going back to where we were. We'll probably we probably have taken some steps ahead. We'll probably take a few steps behind the old ways. We'll somewhere land in between, right? That's my guess. But I think definitely there's an opportunity to build on top of it, because this is something which is an opportunity which has been created not by any of us, right? I mean, it's just everybody has had this. So yeah, everybody needs to jump on it and move on, right? And it has created this connectivity and bridges between systems, right? Like today in my own zone, in my own ward, the PHC doctor is much better known, right? The BBMP officers over there are, the JC is much better known, right? They know him, right? They have been responsive. Everybody has their numbers. They're calling them, they're talking them, they're on WhatsApp, etc. Right? These are all very, very important but very good incremental aspects. Our committee members today are more in touch with the local ecosystem, right? They know whom to call to be able to talk to them, to support them, because those people are coming and saying, hey, can we conduct a camp? We need to be able to do a testing process, etc. Right? So it's a collaboration which is getting built in, and we can carry forward from there.
That's very true. So there's a lot more awareness of the local governance systems. That's very true. So Bhaskar and Lata ma'am, are you also feeling as hopeful and optimistic? Do you think things will improve both from an industry perspective, the way industry looks at the future of the city, as well as from the government perspective saying, okay, we need to fix these systems, whether it's our hospitals or schools, or the way we do planning and execution. So do you see there is this has the system been re-energized to say, okay, now let's do better? You're on mute, ma'am. Hello, Lata ma'am, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. So, okay, actually it is true, Meera, and, I'm really happy to know that, how the Sapna and Vikram, they were telling and they were sharing their experiences with how did they dealt with that COVID pandemic situation. And, this is in a true sense, it is a citizen participation. It is they are giving a right message saying that, you see, only government cannot, our government officials cannot do anything all alone. And the participation of, such a proactive citizen is also very, very important. And I'm really happy to know all these things, since government keeps a one step and the public comes, 10 steps forward to join their hands and bring something, that is really, we are having a, indication that we are having a very bright future ahead, Meera. It's a good team and good participation, and it's really going to give a good result, I hope.
Yeah, Bhaskar.
We as a developers, especially, we are always optimistic. We'll say it through because always it's a challenge. Doing business as well as, even in COVID, actually, our Anil Naik, the CEO of CREDAI, probably worked 24/7. There was a constant helpline between the Labor Department and the CREDAI. So, we thought with all these challenges, we are very optimistic. But currently we are kind of, slowly moving on. We'll have to catch up. But now only, in mind the topic of the day, how we are going to live the next decade. So from that point of view, I was just trying to emphasize the challenges and where we need to focus. And we're all probably, if Mr. Naresh was there, probably he would have thrown a better light. So, but still, I think we have covered, and we are very optimistic that things will be ultimately falling in place and we'll be doing good and justice to all these stakeholders. And even especially to the city where we live in.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I think there are a couple of questions from the audience. So one was a very specific question about increasing FAR. How does that help in proper planning? Do you want to take that, Bhaskar?
Increasing the FAR, as per the Country and Town Planning Act, it is proportionately linked to the width of the road. So, on top of it, if you are buying anything and loading, it all depends on the location. Density, this opportunity you are having along the metro line, so that, you can, have a infrastructure and the commute becomes simpler, and you are, kind of discouraging the usage of your own private vehicles and encouraging the, public transportation. And ultimately, keep the pollution in control. Okay, so FAR is not increased. FAR cannot be increased by and large. Only, TDR is an issue today that is not there. So when we are doing development, density, FAR generally increases the density. It is proportionate to road, and we just have to make sure ultimately we cannot come out of the zoning regulations and build it within the parameter. If it is permissible, yes, they will be doing it, anybody for that matter, because in real estate, land is one of the biggest component.
Yeah, but the newer transit oriented development policies and all are also talking about it, right?
Yes, correct. So that's along the metro
only, right?
Okay. Yes, along the metro, to push or encourage the usage of the public transportation.
Okay, cool. There's one more question. This is about when can we as citizens, forget, while we can talk about RERA, we can talk about real estate, we can talk about all of this, but the simple requirement of to be able to walk on safe footpaths or a clean city, having a clean city and without unauthorized or illegal encroachments, having smooth roads and sustainable mobility. When do we have that? It's a very open question. I don't know if any of the panelists would like to take it.
I just want to say one point actually. What Naresh has done on the Church Street, actually it should have done probably 15, 20, 25 years back. Okay, now you have executed that brilliant thing, but at least have the plan where all you are going to have this done. So that, if everything starts with the thinking. If you have a plan, then execution might be deferred. Okay, so that's all I had to say. Other people can just take this. Nobody's competent.
Sapna.
Yeah, no, because the question is about footpaths. I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention that BBMP has just launched a campaign on seeking inputs for footpaths for the upcoming budget. So under the My City, My Budget campaign. So please feel free to sign up on that campaign. Let them know where you want the footpaths. They have committed saying funds are not a problem. And the commissioner has said that he will take citizen inputs and ensure that within a year there is visible change on public toilets and on footpaths to provide safe streets for citizens. So let's use this opportunity there's a lot of road in Bangalore. It's over 14,000 kilometers, but we should do whatever we can to let them know this is where the priority should be. At least.
Absolutely, that is great. And perhaps I can say even on behalf of BAF, as well as like in general apartments around the city, given that all the high density areas are concentrated on the peripheral areas and the 110 village area, I really hope that these footpaths and good roads would come sooner than later, because the newer areas are definitely neglected and and I just hope the governments and developers can work together. So not just, putting fancy amenities inside the apartments, but also perhaps do it as part of your CSR, contributing to fixing the road in the front of the communities also. So with that, I just want to thank all the panelists, and thank you so much for being here, and look forward to a better year ahead. Have a great 2021.